of meat is a real problem. So we're feeding, you really have to look at the whole food chain. And the food chain starts with water, and then the water is what makes healthy plants, vegetables, and then healthy plants and vegetables are eaten by animals, smaller animals, and then larger animals eat the smaller animals. And so if you have a problem anywhere in that food chain, the end result is, not so good for you. Yeah. Well, the simple version of that is America's Best Water is this brand called Mountain Valley. And they have both a sparkling and a spring water. And drinking at least a portion of your fluid intake of Mountain Valley is a great way of getting the electrolyte that you need. The world of water it's quite complex, and there are two scientific disciplines there. One is climatology and one is hydrology. Climatology is really more about understanding the environment that you're in. The water that you need changes based on the environment that you're in. So if you're in the desert, for example, the water that you need is different than if you're in the rainforest, is different than if you're in the mountains, is different if you're in New Jersey. And then because we live in New Jersey, we can kind of ignore climatology and focus more on hydrology. And hydrology is like it's complexity across water. So it really incorporates it incorporates pH and total dissolved solids and electrolyte balance. And the reason it matters for the brain has to do with really how the brain is fueled. So, a lot of times clients ask me, well, can I add electrolytes to my water? Will this improve the hydration of my brain? And it's a question mark. The best hydration for the brain is really packaged by nature under specific conditions. So there are world-class water reservoirs that produce this medical grade water that is really wonderful at fueling the brain and the connective tissue system. Yeah, so that's sort of the first cut at answering that question.
Cool. So what I want to know is, because you were on the side of extremity as far as the punishment part of the body, where you played hockey, and then for the last 20 years you're not playing hockey, and you're sort of you're not living on the extreme side of punishment and recovery. So it's going to be a two-part question for someone in an extreme situation like an athlete, and for someone as a regular person. What is the proper way for us when we take that punishment? What is the proper way to recover? Like, how would you tell us to go about that?
Yeah, so the way you use your body, you really need to design a recovery program for that specific use. The analogy I use a little bit, my first degree is as a mechanical engineer, and
Oh, wow.
and in engineering, like, where you can sort of think about the way aircraft work, right? So in an airplane, for every hour of flight, there's some number of minutes of service to make that aircraft airworthy again. If we convert that over to the same philosophy with the body and the way you're using your body. Depending on how you're using your body determines how much time, how many reps of reorganizational exercise you should be doing for every rep of exercise. To come at it from a slightly different angle, you can think about the different forms of athleticism and how organizing or disorganizing the activity is. So, and it's kind of a spectrum. So, on one end of the spectrum, you could think about like Pilates as being a pretty intelligent way of moving your body. And Pilates, a lot of Pilates is reorganizational, some is disorganizational. And then on the other end of the extreme, you would have like fighting, like jujitsu or boxing or this kind of thing. And those reps are very, very disorganizing. The more disorganizing the activity, the more time you have to focus getting the body prepared again to go out and do battle or do the activity.
Mhm. So, the next question that arises, how much well, because you mentioned water, obviously it's very important, but how much does overall diet has to do with your spine's health and your recovery time, and how important is diet?
Yeah, diet is what you put in your body is really what your body uses to make tissue and regenerate itself. So like tissue makes like tissue is the little verbiage that Guy like to use. Um, you know, diet is really tricky because our food supply is not so good, and so a lot of the base ingredients are a problem to the diet. So like the genetically modified grain in America, all grain is GMO grain. And this has been a real problem
Yeah.
for health and weight and how that affects the spine. All of the all of the organs inside of your body are connected to your spine physically through connective tissue. And the heavier you are, the harder the the connective tissue is pulling on the spine and manipulating it into a bad curve, a bad form. And so the body gets pretty stressed out by having the bad diet, being overweight. um, and then the chronic, a lot of what you're dealing with the bad diet is really chronic inflammation. I think sometimes we think about the word fat.
Mhm.
There's fat in food, right? Like macronutrients, everything is either protein, fat, or carbohydrate.
Mhm.
That fat isn't the same thing as when we're talking about being overweight, being fat.
Right.
And being overweight and being fat is really chronic inflammation. So it's the foods in our diet that are creating chronic inflammation in the tissue, and then the chronic immune response, and the your body has finite resources. So if you're using resources to deal with your gut all the time, you're taking those resources away from your ability to reorganize the joint and reorganize the tissue. And so that when you see elite athletes and they're talking about how disciplined they are with their diet, that's how they're able to stay in top form for 20 years. Guys like Brady and guys like Ronaldo. So yeah, diet is like a big. We could definitely talk diet for a long time.
Well, I just sorry for interrupting you. I just basically what I'm trying to get out of you is, should we stay away completely from GMO and seek, organic food, us in the West and us in America? And the big argument nowadays with, the vegans slash vegetarian versus the meat eater, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the the quality of meat is a real problem. So we're feeding you really have to look at the whole food chain, and the food chain starts with water, and then the water is what makes healthy plants, vegetables, and then healthy plants and vegetables are eaten by animals, smaller animals, and then larger animals eat the smaller animals. And so if you have a problem anywhere in that food chain, the end result is, not so good for you. And what's happened in meat, the meat supply in America is, like beef is sold by the pound. And so it's important to make the cow as fat as possible for the least amount of money as possible. And so the things that the cow are fed is not it's not grass purely. So if you can get grass-fed, grass-finished beef, now we're getting back to the way the animal was supposed to be fed in nature. If the cow is being fed, Twinkies that are no longer fit for human consumption, then what happens to the cow is the cow gets sick, and so then you have to put the cow on antibiotics, and now the cow becomes lethargic, so you have to put the cow on steroids, and you no longer have a cow that's so healthy. And so you see this plays out in a number of ways. Like, they're seeing teenage girls going through puberty earlier, and
Yes.
some of that is attributed to the steroids that are in the food supply.
Yep.
So we have a big problem in this country. Um, the FDA is really there to try to regulate things that are unfit for human consumption, and they're up against a lobby that is constantly trying to get around that hurdle, rather than the FDA being about, is this food of optimal health for human beings? So the people who are supposed to be watching our back are, have allowed, since 1950, there have been 50,000 chemicals added to the food supply, and no two chemicals have been studied in combination with each other.
Wow.
So that's the big problem. So I think sometimes what you see now with the vegetarian and the vegan is, sometimes this is for ethical, humane reasons why people choose this. And part of it is because, sometimes you're more sensitive to these things, and they don't feel right in your body. And so you're trying to, you know, eat healthier and eliminate them. Vegetarianism really falls into two categories for me. You have kind of what I refer to as, like the Indian traditional vegetarian, where it's a lot of lentils and greens, and this kind of vegetarianism makes much more sense to me. When you start eating pizza and GMO grain and
Yeah.
vegetarian, this is not it at all.
Yep.
So if your diet is, greens and those kind of things, there are reasons why that makes a lot of sense, and you do still need. Okay, so that's that part of it. From a pure health standpoint, there are times in a cycle, in a year, say, where it makes sense to have a vegetarian diet, um, and even parts of vegan diet.
Mhm.
But to live 10 years in a row without the amino acids and proteins from meat, this from my context is not healthy.
Mhm.
So you want to be getting, like omega-3 oils from fish, and you would like to get some proteins from, some animals somewhere in the food pyramid for optimal health.
Mhm.
that's kind of the high level on that one.
How important is the protein, and is there, different kinds of protein, meaning like the quality of protein? Like how important is it for our spine health and overall health? Because you mentioned 10 years. I've been vegan for 12 years, and I'm kind of starting to think lately, maybe I'm missing something in my blood where I'm not, maybe I was younger and didn't pay attention to it. So how important is that protein, in our system, and the kind of protein?